Some years ago, when John was first learning about the Jewish roots of the Christian faith, which he is now a master of, he was desperately trying to learn more about Jewish things. And so he took a Jewish man he knew, Fred Rubenstein, to a restaurant, and they both ordered some fish. The Jewish guy ordered his fish with the head on, and John ordered his fish with the head off. John watched in disbelief as his Jewish friend began to eat the meat off the head of the fish. John asked Fred, how can you eat that? And Rubenstein replied, oh, don't you know? That's why Jewish people are so smart. They eat the meat off the head of the fish. Well, John said, maybe I should do the same thing. And his Jewish friend said, of course you should. Listen, I'll sell you my fish head. Give me $10 and it's yours. Well, John immediately pulled $10 out of his wallet and handed it to Fred Rubenstein, who passed over the fish head to John, who began to eat the head of the fish. A few minutes later, as they continued to talk and eat, John said, hey Rubenstein, I just realized something. I paid you $10 for this fish head, but I could have gotten a whole fish, freshly cooked, for the same price. And Rubenstein replied, you see, John, it's working already. You know, there are different time zones around the world. Here in the U.S., we have Eastern Time, Central Time, Mountain Time, Pacific Time. We Jewish people, we have our own time. It's called Jewish Standard Time. The person who's operating on Jewish Standard Time is running late. John tells me that among African Americans there is something similar called CP time. Now, John does not like CP time. He likes to be on time. Well, a couple of years ago, John was leading a tour to the Black History Museum in Detroit. And this was before the time of GPS devices. Well, John was in a bus with the tour group, and they got lost on the way to the museum. And he said to his group, I've got some good news and some bad news. The bad news is, we've lost our way. I have no idea where we are. The good news is, but we're way ahead of schedule. Now, I don't know if you know this about John, but there was a time when John was an avid outdoorsman. And one time it got him in a lot of trouble. That's right. Some years back, John went on a hunting trip to the Sierra Nevada mountains in California. And he was actually arrested for killing a California condor, which is an endangered species. At the trial, the judge said to him, Mr. Denson, I'd like to hear your side of the story. So John replied, Your Honor, I was camping, and I was caught in an avalanche, and I was frozen, starving, and near death. I looked up and I saw a shadow over me. I fired my gun and a condor fell at my feet. And I cooked and I ate that condor. If I hadn't eaten that condor, I would have died of starvation. And the search party found me 2 days later. I'm sorry, Your Honor, but when I shot it, I had no idea it was a condor. Tears welled up in the judge's eyes. And he said, the sanctity of human life outweighs killing an animal that's even on the endangered species list. Mr. Denson, I am going to let you go. Well, as John left the courtroom, he was surrounded by the press. We can't let you go, they said to him without asking, what does a condor taste like? And John replied, oh, it's kind of a cross between a bald eagle and a peregrine falcon. many of us before that God is his co-pilot. Now, you've heard John say that, right? Now, that might sound spiritual, but really, if that's true, John, don't you think it's time you switch seats? One time, a Detroit cop pulled John over for running a stop sign. And he said to John, "Sir, didn't you see that stop sign?" And John replied, "Yeah, but I don't believe everything that I read." John and Donna had a long, interesting, and colorful marriage. John and Donna's marriage began when they, a man and a woman, became as one. The trouble started when they tried to decide which one. Now, even though they have a good marriage, their relationship hasn't always been easy. John and Donna occasionally get into fights. That's right, these two spiritual giants. A couple of months ago, they got into a really serious quarrel, and John came to me, sad, dejected, and he told me, "Rabbi Lauren, I had some words with Donna, and she had some paragraphs with me." After one of their quarrels, John said to Donna, "Donna, you know, I was a fool when I married you." And Donna replied right back, "Yes, dear, but I was in love and I didn't notice it." One of John's sons, when he was young, asked his father, "Dad, I heard that in some parts of Africa, a man does not know his wife until he marries her. Is that true?" And John answered, "That happens in all countries, son."
3 minutes, Rabbi.
David, another one of John's sons, asked his father, "Dad, how much did it cost you to get married?" And John replied, "I don't know, son. I'm still paying for it." I heard about a recent oneg where one of the women noticed that something was not quite right about Donna's appearance. And she said to her, "Mrs. Denson, aren't you wearing your wedding ring on the wrong finger?" In a moment of brutal honesty, Donna replied, "Yes, I am, because I'm pretty sure I married the wrong man." Not too long ago, John was providing some premarital counseling to a young couple. Halfway through this initial session, John knew that they were not right for each other. And so he tried to discourage them from getting married and gave them this pearl of wisdom. Man is incomplete until he is married. And then he's really finished. Take me, for example. I never knew what real happiness was until I got married. But by then it was too late. Right now, John is having amnesia and deja vu at the same time. He thinks he's forgotten all this before. About a year ago, John was driving down the lodge and was going 75 miles an hour and got stopped by a cop who said to him, "Sir, do you know the speed limit is 55 miles per hour on this highway?" "Yes, officer," John replied, "but I knew I wasn't going to be out that long." John, we know you want to serve God, which is wonderful, but don't you think it's time that you do so as something other than one of his advisors? had a dream in which you find yourself in the middle of a crowd, naked. I think many of us have had that kind of dream. It's not a nice dream. Now, you know that John likes Star Trek. Well, one night, John had a dream that he was a member of the crew of the Starship Enterprise. He was on a space station in the middle of a crowd, and it was time for him to get back to the Enterprise. So he used his communicator and asked Scotty to beam him up. The sound of the transporter could be heard, but John was not on board the Enterprise. He was still on the space station in the middle of that crowd. John looked around, suddenly got very embarrassed, used his communicator again, and said, "Very funny, Scotty. Now beam me back down my clothes." John, always remember, you are absolutely unique, just like everyone else. Thank you.